Chapter 2. Right by the crossroads, where the forest ended, 9 posts were driven into the ground. Each was crowned by a cartwheel, mounted flat. Above the wheels teemed crows and ravens, pecking and tearing at the corpses bound to the rims and hubs. Owing to the height of the posts and the great number of birds, one could only imagine what the unidentifiable remains lying on top of the wheels might be. But they were bodies. They couldn't have been anything else. Ciri turned her head away and wrinkled her nose in disgust. The wind blew from the posts, and the sickening stench of rotting corpses drifted above the crossroads. "Wonderful scenery," said Yennefer, leaning out of the saddle and spitting on the ground, forgetting that a short time earlier she had fiercely scolded Ciri for doing the same thing. "Picturesque and fragrant. But why do this here, at the edge of the wilderness? They usually set things like that up right outside the city walls. Am I right, good people?" "They're squirrels, noble lady," came the hurried explanation from one of the wandering traders they had caught up with at the crossroads. He was guiding the piebald horse harnessed to his fully laden cart. "Elves, they're on those posts, and that's why the posts are by the forest, as a warning to other squirrels." "Does that mean," said the enchantress, looking at him, "that captured Scoia'tael are brought here alive?" "Elves, my lady, seldom let themselves be taken alive," interrupted the trader. "And even if the soldiers catch one, they take them to the city, because civilized non-humans dwell there. When they've watched squirrels being tortured in the town square, they quickly lose interest in joining them. But if any elves are killed in combat, their bodies are taken to a crossroads and hung on posts like this. Sometimes they're brought from far away, and by the time they get here, they reek—" "To think," snapped Yennefer, "we have been forbidden from necromantic practices out of respect for the dignity of death and mortal remains, on the grounds that they deserve reverence, peace, and a ritual and ceremonial burial." "What are you saying, my lady?" "Nothing. We're leaving, Ciri. Let's get away from this place. Ugh. I feel as though the stench was sticking to me." "Yuck. Me too," said Ciri, trotting around the trader's cart. "Let's gallop, yes?" "Very well. Ciri, gallop, but don't break your neck." They soon saw the city, surrounded by walls, bristling with towers, with glistening pointed roofs. And beyond the city was the sea, grey-green, sparkling in the morning sun, flecked here and there with the white dots of sails. Ciri reined in her horse at the edge of a sandy drop, stood up in her stirrups, and greedily breathed in the wind and the scent. "Gors Velen," said Yennefer, riding up and stopping at her side. "We finally made it. Let's get back on the road." They rode off down the road at a canter, leaving several ox carts and people walking, laden down with faggots, behind them. Once they had overtaken them all and were alone, though, the enchantress slowed and gestured for Ciri to stop. "Come closer," she said. "Closer still. Take the reins and lead my horse. I need both hands." "What for?" "I said, take the reins, Ciri." Yennefer took a small silver looking-glass from her saddlebags, wiped it, and then whispered a spell. The looking-glass floated out of her hand, rose up, and remained suspended above her horse's neck, right before the enchantress's face. Ciri let out a sigh of awe and licked her lips. The enchantress removed a comb from her saddlebags, took off her beret, and combed her hair vigorously for the next few minutes. Ciri remained silent. She knew she was forbidden to disturb or distract Yennefer while she combed her hair. The arresting and apparently careless disarray of her wavy, luxuriant locks was the result of long, hard work and demanded no little effort. The enchantress reached into her saddlebags once more. She attached some diamond earrings to her ears and fastened bracelets on both wrists. She took off her shawl and undid a few buttons on her blouse, revealing her neck and a black velvet ribbon decorated with an obsidian star. "Ha!" said Ciri at last, unable to hold back. "I know why you're doing that. You want to look nice because we're going to the city. Am I right?" "Yes, you are." "What about me?" "What about you?" "I want to look nice too. I'll do my hair." "Put your beret on," said Yennefer sharply, eyes still fixed on the looking-glass floating above the horse's ears. right where it was before, and tuck your hair underneath it." Ciri snorted angrily, but obeyed at once. She had long ago learned to distinguish the timbre and shades of the enchantress's voice. She had learned when she could get into a discussion, and when it was wiser not to. Yennefer, having at last arranged the locks over her forehead, took a small green glass jar out of her saddlebags. "Ciri," she said more gently, "we're travelling in secret, and the journey's not over yet, which is why you have to hide your hair under your beret. There are people at every gate who are paid for their accurate and reliable observation of travellers. Do you understand?" "No," retorted Ciri impudently, reining back the enchantress's black stallion. "You've made yourself beautiful to make those gate watchmen's eyes pop out. Very secretive, I must say." "The city to whose gates we are heading," smiled Yennefer, "is Gors Velen. I don't have to disguise myself in Gors Velen. Quite the contrary, I'd say. With you, it's different. You ought not to be remembered by anyone. The people who'll be staring at you will see me too." The enchantress uncorked the jar, which gave off the scent of lilac and gooseberries. She stuck her index finger in and rubbed a little of it under her eyes. "I doubt," she said, still smiling mysteriously, "whether anyone will notice you." A long column of riders and wagons stood before the bridge, and travellers crowded around the gatehouse, waiting for their turn to be searched. Ciri fumed and growled, angry at the prospect of a long wait. Yennefer, however, sat up straight in the saddle and rode at a trot, looking high over the heads of the travellers. They parted swiftly for her and made room, bowing in respect. The guards in hauberks also noticed the enchantress at once and gave her free passage, liberally handing out blows with their spear shafts to the stubborn or the overly slow. "This way, noble lady," called one of the guards, staring at Yennefer and flushing. "Come through here, I entreat you. Make way, you churls." The hastily summoned officer of the watch emerged from the guardhouse, sullen and angry. But at the sight of Yennefer, he blushed, opened his eyes and his mouth wide, and made a low bow. "I humbly welcome you to Gors Velen, your ladyship," he mumbled, straightening up and staring. "I am at your command. May I be of any service to you? Perhaps an escort? A guide? Should I summon anyone?" "That will not be necessary," replied Yennefer, straightening up in her saddle and looking down at him. "My stay in the city shall be brief. I am riding to Thaneth." "Of course, ma'am," said the soldier, shifting from foot to foot and unable to tear his eyes from the enchantress's face. The other guards also stared. Ciri, proudly, pulled her shoulders back and raised her head, only to realize no one was looking at her. It was as if she didn't exist. "Yes, ma'am," repeated the officer of the guard. "To Thaneth, yes, for the conclave. I understand. Very well. Then I wish you—" "Thank you," said the enchantress, spurring her horse, clearly uninterested in whatever the officer wanted to wish her. Ciri followed her. The guardsmen bowed to Yennefer as she rode by, but none of them paid Ciri so much as a glance. "They didn't even ask your name," she muttered, catching up with Yennefer and carefully guiding her horse between the ruts worn into the muddy road. "Did you put a spell on them?" "Not on them. On myself." The enchantress turned back, and Ciri sighed. Yennefer's eyes burnt with a violet light, and her face radiated with beauty. Dazzling beauty. Provocative. Dangerous. And unnatural. The little green jar, Ciri realized. What was in it? Glamorai, an elixir, or rather a cream for special occasions. "Ciri, must you ride into every puddle in the road? I'm trying to clean my horse's fetlocks. It hasn't rained for a month. That's slops and horse piss, not water." "Uh-huh." "Tell me, why did you use that elixir? Did it matter so much to you to—" "This is Gors Velen," interrupted Yennefer, "a city that owes much of its prosperity to sorcerers and enchantresses. Actually, if I'm honest, chiefly to enchantresses. You saw for yourself how enchantresses are treated here, and I had no desire to introduce myself or prove who I am. I preferred to make it obvious at first glance. We turn left after that red house. We'll walk, Ciri. Slow your horse down or you'll trample a child." "But why did we come here, then?" I just told you." Ciri snorted, thinking hard, then pursed her lips and dug her heels hard into her horse. Her mare skittered, almost colliding with a passing horse and cart. The carter got up from his seat, ready to unleash a stream of professional abuse at her, but on seeing Yennefer, sat down quickly and began a thorough analysis of the state of his clogs. "Try to bolt like that once more," enunciated Yennefer, "and we'll get cross. You're behaving like an adolescent goat. You're embarrassing me. I figured it out. You want to put me in some school or orphanage, don't you? I don't want to go. Be quiet. People are staring. They're staring at you, not at me. I don't want to go to school. You promised me you'd always be with me, and now you're planning to leave me all by myself. I don't want to be alone." "You won't be alone. There are plenty of girls your age at the school. You'll have lots of friends. I don't want any friends. I want to be with you, and I thought we'd—" Yennefer suddenly turned to face her. "What did you think?" "I thought we were going to see Geralt," said Ciri, tossing her head provocatively. "I know perfectly well what you've been thinking about the entire journey, and why you were sighing at night." "Enough!" hissed the enchantress, and the sight of her glaring eyes made Ciri bury her face in her horse's mane. "You've overstepped the mark. May I remind you that the moment when you could defy me has passed forever. You only have yourself to blame, and now you have to be obedient. You'll do as I say. Understood?" Ciri nodded. "Whatever I say will be the best for you, always. Which is why you will obey me and carry out my instructions. Is that clear? Rein in your horse. We're here." "That's the school," grunted Ciri, looking up at the magnificent facade of a building. "Is that not another word? Dismount and mind your manners. This isn't the school. It's in Aretusa, not in Gorsvillen. This is a bank. Why do we need a bank? Think about it, and dismount, as I said. Not in a puddle. Leave your horse, that's the servant's job. Take off your gloves. You don't go into a bank wearing riding gloves. Look at me, Ciri. Straighten your beret, and your collar. Stand up straight. And if you don't know what to do with your hands, then don't do anything with them." Ciri sighed. The servants who poured out of the entrance and assisted them, falling over each other as they bowed, were dwarves. Ciri looked at them with interest. Although they were all short, sturdy, and bearded, in no way did they resemble her companion Yarpen Zigrin or his lads. These servants looked grey, identically uniformed and unremarkable. They were subservient, too, which could never be said about Yarpen and his lads. They went inside. The magic elixir was still working, so Yennefer's appearance immediately caused a great commotion. More dwarves bustled and bowed, and there were further obsequious welcomes and declarations of readiness to serve, which only subsided on the appearance of a fat, opulently attired and white-bearded dwarf. "My dear Yennefer," boomed the dwarf, jingling a golden chain which dangled from a powerful neck and fell to considerably below his white beard. "What a surprise, and what an honour! Please, please come to my office. And you lot, don't stand there staring. To work, to your abacuses. Wilfley, bring a bottle of Castel de Neuf to my office." "Which vintage? You know what vintage. Be quick, jump to it. This way, Yennefer. It's an unalloyed joy to see you. You look... Oh, damn it, you look drop-dead gorgeous." "As do you," the enchantress smiled. "You're keeping well, Giancardi." "Naturally. Please come through to my office. But no, you go first. You know the way after all, Yennefer." It was a little dark, but pleasantly cool in the office, and the air held a scent Ciri remembered from Jara the scribe's tower. The smell of ink and parchment and dust covering the oak furniture, tapestries and old books. "Sit down, please," said the banker, pulling a heavy armchair away from the table for Yennefer, and throwing Ciri a curious glance. "Give her a book, Molnar," said the enchantress carelessly, noticing his look. "She adores books. She'll sit at the end of the table and won't disturb us. Will you, Ciri?" Ciri did not deign to reply. "A book? Said the dwarf, solicitously going over to a chest of drawers. What have we here? Oh, a ledger. No, not that. Duties and port charges? Not that either. Credit and reimbursement? No. Oh, how did that get here? God only knows. But this will probably be just the thing. There you go, miss. The book bore the title Physiologus, and was very old and very tattered. Ciri carefully opened the cover and turned several pages. The book immediately caught her interest, since it concerned mysterious monsters and beasts, and was full of illustrations. For the next few moments, she tried to divide her interest between the book and the conversation between the enchantress and the dwarf. "Do you have any letters for me, Molnar?" "No," said the banker, pouring wine for Yennefer and himself. "No new ones have arrived. I delivered the last ones a month ago, using our usual method." "I received them, thank you. Did anyone show interest in those letters by any chance?" "No one here," smiled Molnar Giancardi. "But your suspicions are not unwarranted, my dear. The Vivaldi Bank informed me, confidentially, that several attempts were made to track the letters. Their branch in Vengerberg also uncovered an attempt to track all transactions of your private account. A member of the staff proved to be disloyal." The dwarf broke off and looked at the enchantress from beneath his bushy eyebrows. Ciri listened intently. Yennefer said nothing, and toyed with her obsidian star. "Vivaldi," said the banker, lowering his voice, "couldn't or didn't want to conduct an investigation into the case. The corrupt, disloyal clerk fell, drunk, into a ditch and drowned. An unfortunate accident. Pity. Too quick, too hasty." "No use crying over spilt milk," the enchantress pouted. "I know who was interested in my letters and account. The investigation at Vivaldi's wouldn't have produced any revelations." "If you say so." Giancardi ruffled his beard. "Are you going to Thanedd, Yennefer? To the General Major's conclave?" "Indeed." "To determine the fate of the world?" "Let's not exaggerate." "Various rumours are doing the rounds," said the dwarf coldly, "and various things are happening." "What might they be, if it's not a secret?" "Since last year," said Giancardi, stroking his beard, "strange fluctuations in taxation policy have been observed. I know it doesn't interest you. Go on." "Poll tax and winter billeting tax, both of which are levied directly by the military authorities, have been doubled. Every merchant and entrepreneur also has to pay their 10th groat into the royal treasury. This is an entirely new tax, 1 groat on every noble of turnover. In addition, dwarves, gnomes, elves, and halflings are paying increased poll and chimney tax. If they engage in trade or manufacturing, they are also charged with a compulsory non-human donation of 10 per 100 groats. In this way I hand over 60% of my income to the treasury. My bank, including all its branches, gives the 4 kingdoms 600 marks a year. For your information, that's almost 3 times as much as a wealthy duke or earl pays in levy on an extensive estate." "Are humans not also charged with making the donation for the army?" "No, only the winter billeting tax and poll tax." "That means," the enchantress nodded, "that the dwarves and other non-humans are financing the campaign being waged against the Scoia'tael in the forests. I expected something like that. But what do taxes have to do with the conclave on Thanedd?" "Something always happens after your conclaves," muttered the banker. "Something always happens. This time, I hope it will finally be the opposite. I'm counting on your conclave stopping things from happening. I'd be very happy, for example, if these strange price rises were to stop." "Be precise." The dwarf leaned back in his chair and linked his fingers across his beard-covered belly. "I've worked for a good many years in this profession," he said, "sufficiently long to be able to connect certain price fluctuations with certain facts. And recently, the prices of precious stones have risen sharply, because there's a demand for them." "Isn't cash usually exchanged for gemstones to avoid losses based on fluctuations in exchange rates and parities of coinage?" "That too, but gemstones have one other considerable virtue. A pouch of diamonds, weighing a few ounces, which can fit inside a pocket, corresponds in value to some 50 marks. The same sum in coins weighs 25 pounds and would fill a fair-sized sack. It is considerably quicker and easier to run away with a pouch in one's pocket than with a sack over one's shoulder. And one has one's hands free, which is of no small import. One can hold on to one's wife with one hand, and if needs must, punch someone with the other." Ciri snorted quietly, but Yennefer immediately quietened her with a fierce look. "Which means," she looked up, "that some people are preparing well in advance to run away. But where to, I wonder?" "The far north tops the list. Hengfors, Kovir and Povis. Firstly, because it's indeed far away, and secondly, because those countries are neutral and are on good terms with Nilfgaard." "I see," said the enchantress, a nasty smile on her lips. "So it's diamonds into your pocket, grab the wife, and head for the north. Not too premature? Oh, never mind. So tell me, what else is getting dearer?" "Boats." "What?" "Boats," repeated the dwarf, grinning. "All the boat builders from the coast are building boats. They're orders placed by quartermasters from King Foltest's army. The quartermasters pay well and keep placing new orders. Invest in boats, Yennefer, if you have any spare capital. It's a gold mine. You can build a boat from bark and reeds, make out a bill for a bark made of first-rate pine, and split the profit with the quartermaster." "Don't joke, Giancardi. Tell me what it's about." "Those boats," said the banker casually, looking at the ceiling, "are transported south, to Sodden and Brugge, to the river Yaruga. From what I hear, they aren't used for catching fish on the river. They're being hidden in the forest on the east bank. It's said the army is spending hours on embarkation and disembarkation drills, but it's not for real yet." "Aha," said Yennefer, biting her lip. "And why are some people in such a rush to lend a hand? Yaruga is in the south." "There's some understandable anxiety," muttered the dwarf, glancing over at Ciri, "that Emperor Emir var Emrys will not be overjoyed when he hears that the aforementioned boats have been launched. Some people think it is sure to infuriate him, and then it'll be better to be as far as possible from the Nilfgaardian border. Hell, at least until the harvest. Once the harvest's in, I'll sigh with relief. If something's going to happen, it'll happen before the harvest."
"Before the crops are in the granaries," said Yennefer slowly.
"That's right. It's hard to graze horses on stubble, and strongholds with full granaries can endure long sieges. The weather is favourable for farmers, and the harvest looks promising. Yes, the weather is exceptionally beautiful. The sun's hot, so cats and dogs alike are hoping it'll soon rain, cats and dogs. And the Yaruga in Dol Angra is very shallow. It's easy to ford it in both directions."
"Why Dol Angra?"
"I hope," said the banker, stroking his beard and fixing the sorceress with a penetrating glance, "I can trust you."
"You've always been able to, Giancardi. Nothing has changed."
"Dol Angra," said the dwarf slowly, "means Lyria and Aedion, who have a military alliance with Temeria. You surely don't think that Foltest, who's buying the boats, intends to use them for his own ends, do you?"
"No," said the enchantress slowly. "I don't. Thank you for the information, Molnar. Who knows? Perhaps you're right. Perhaps at the conclave we'll somehow manage to influence the fate of the world and the people living in it."
"Don't forget about the dwarves," snorted Giancardi, "or their banks."
"We'll try not to. Since we're on the subject—"
"I'm all ears."
"I have some expenses, Molnar, and should I take something from my account at the Vivaldi Bank, someone is bound to drown again, so—"
"Yennefer," interrupted the dwarf, "you have unlimited credit with me. The pogrom in Vengerberg took place long ago. Perhaps you have forgotten, but I never will. None of the Giancardi family will forget. How much do you need?"
1,500 Temerian orins transferred to the branch of the Cianfanelli Bank in Ellender, in favour of the Temple of Melitele.
"Consider it done. A nice transfer. Donations to temples aren't taxed. What else?"
"What are the annual fees for the school at Aretusa?"
Ciri listened carefully. 1,200 Novigrad crowns, said Giancardi, and then you have to add the matriculation fee, around 200 for a new novice.
It's bloody gone up.
Everything has. They don't skimp on novices, though. They live like queens at Aretusa, and half the city lives off them. Tailors, shoemakers, confectioners, suppliers.
I know. Pay 2,000 into the school's account, anonymously. with a note that it's the registration fee and payment of the annual fees for one novice. The dwarf put down his quill, looked at Ciri, and smiled in understanding. Ciri, pretending to leaf through the book, listened intently. "Will that be all, Yennefer?" "And 300 Novigrad crowns for me, in cash. I'll need at least 3 dresses for the conclave on Thanet." "Why cash? I'll give you a banker's draft for 500. The prices of imported fabric have risen damnably, and you don't dress in wool or linen after all. And should you need anything, for yourself or for the future pupil at Aretusa, my shops and storehouses are at your disposal."
"Thank you. What interest rate shall we say?"
"Interest?" said the dwarf, looking up. "You paid the Giancardi family in advance, Yennefer, in Vengerberg. Let's talk no more about it."
"I don't like debts of this kind, Molnar."
"Neither do I. But I'm a merchant, a business dwarf. I know what an obligation is. I know its value. So I repeat, let's speak no more about it. You may consider the favours you've asked of me sorted, and the favour you didn't ask about, too."
Yennefer raised an eyebrow.
"A certain Witcher I consider family," chuckled Giancardi, "visited the city of Dorian recently. I was informed he ran up a debt of 100 crowns with a moneylender there. The said moneylender works for me. I'll cancel the debt, Yennefer."
The enchantress glanced at Ciri and made a sour grimace. "Molnar," she said coldly, "don't stick your fingers in a door with broken hinges. I doubt he still holds me dear, and if he learns about any debts being cancelled, he'll hate my guts. You know him, don't you? Honour is an obsession with him. Was he in Dorian a long time ago?"
"Some 10 days ago. Then he was seen in Little Marsh. I'm informed he went from there to Hirundum, since he had a commission from the farmers there. Some kind of monster to kill, as usual."
"And as usual they'll be paying him peanuts for killing it." Yennefer's voice changed a little. "Which, as usual, will barely cover the cost of medical treatment should he be mauled by the monster. Business as usual. If you really want to do something for me, Molnar, get involved. Contact the farmers from Hirundum and raise the bounty. Give him enough to live on."
"Business as usual," snorted Giancardi. "And if he eventually finds out about it?"
Yennefer fixed her eyes on Ciri, who was watching and listening now, not even attempting to feign interest in Physiologus. "And from whom," she muttered, "might he find out?" Ciri lowered her gaze. The dwarf smiled meaningfully and stroked his beard.
"Will you be heading towards Hirundum before setting off for Thanet? Just by chance, of course."
"No," said the enchantress, turning away. "I won't. Change the subject, Molnar." Giancardi stroked his beard again and looked at Ciri. She lowered her head, cleared her throat, and fidgeted in her chair.
"Quite," he said. "Time to change the subject. But your charge is clearly bored by that book and by our conversation, and my next topic will bore her even more, I suspect. The fate of the world, the fate of the dwarves of this world, the fate of their banks. What a boring subject for girls, for future graduates of Aretusa. Let her spread her wings a little, Yennefer. Let her take a walk around the city."
"Oh, yes!" cried Ciri. The enchantress looked annoyed and was opening her mouth to protest, but suddenly changed tack. Ciri wasn't certain, but she suspected the faint wink that accompanied the banker's suggestion influenced her decision.
"Let the girl have a look at the wonders of the ancient city of Gorsvelen," added Giancardi, smiling broadly. "She deserves a little freedom before Aretusa, and we'll chat about certain issues of a personal nature. No, I'm not suggesting the girl goes alone, even though it's a safe city. I'll assign her a companion and guardian, one of my younger clerks."
"Forgive me, Molnar," said Yennefer, ignoring the smile, "but I'm not convinced that in the present times, and even in a safe city, the presence of a dwarf—"
"It didn't even occur to me," said Giancardi indignantly, "to send her with a dwarf. The clerk I have in mind is the son of a respected merchant, every inch a human, if you will excuse the expression. Did you think I only employ dwarves? Hey, Filfly, summon Fabio and look lively."
"Ciri." The enchantress walked over to her, bending forward slightly. "Make sure there's no funny business, nothing I'll have to be ashamed of, and keep stum. Got it? Promise me you'll watch your words and deeds. Don't just nod. Promises are made aloud." "I promise, Yennefer." "And glance at the sun from time to time. You're to be back at noon, punctually, and should— No, I don't imagine anyone will recognize you, but should you notice someone observing you too intently— The enchantress put her hand in her pocket and pulled out a small piece of chrysoprase, marked with runes, ground and polished into the shape of an hourglass. Put that in your pouch and don't lose it, in case of emergencies. Do you recall the spell? Just use it discreetly. Activation emits a powerful echo, and the amulet transmits waves when it's in use. Should there be someone nearby who's sensitive to magic, you'll reveal yourself to them, rather than remain hidden. And take this, should you wish to buy something. Thank you, madam. Ciri put the amulet and coins into her pouch, and looked with interest at the boy who had rushed into the office. He was freckled, and his wavy chestnut hair fell onto the high collar of his grey clerk's uniform. "Fabio Sachs," said Giancardi by way of introduction. The boy bowed courteously. "Fabio, this is Madame Yennefer, our honoured guest and respected client, and this young lady, her ward, wishes to visit our city. You shall be accompanying her and acting as her guide and guardian." The boy bowed once more, this time towards Ciri. "Ciri," said Yennefer coldly, "please stand up." She stood up, slightly taken aback, for she knew the custom well enough to know it wasn't expected of her, and she understood at once what Yennefer had seen. The clerk might look the same age as Ciri, but he was a head shorter. "Molnar," said the enchantress, "who is taking care of whom? Couldn't you assign someone of slightly more substantial dimensions to this task?" The boy blushed and looked at his superior questioningly. Giancardi nodded his head in assent. The clerk bowed a third time. "Your Highness," he began, fluently and confidently, "I may not be tall, but you can rely on me. I know the city, the suburbs, and the surroundings very well. I shall look after this young lady to the best of my ability, and if I, Fabio Sachs the younger, son of Fabio Sachs, do something to the best of my ability, then many an older boy would not better it." Yennefer looked at him for a while, and then turned towards the banker. "Congratulations, Molnar," she said. "You know how to choose your staff. You will have cause to be grateful to your young clerk in the future. It's true. The purest gold rings truest when you strike it. Ciri, I entrust you into the care of Fabio, son of Fabio, in absolute confidence, since he is a serious, trustworthy man." The boy blushed to the roots of his chestnut hair. Ciri felt herself blushing too. "Fabio," said the dwarf, opening a small chest and rummaging around in its clinking contents, "here's half a noble and two 5-groat pieces, in the event the young lady requests anything. Should she not, you shall return it. Very well, you may go." "By noon, Ciri," reminded Yennefer, "and not a moment later. I remember. "My name is Fabio," said the boy, as soon as they'd run down the stairs and out into the busy street. "And you're Ciri, right?" "Yes." "What would you like to see in Gorsvelin, Ciri? The main street, Goldsmith's Alley, the seaport, or maybe the market square and the market?" "Everything." Mused the boy seriously. "We've only got till noon. It would be best to go to the market square. It's market day today. You can see heaps of amazing things. But first, we'll go up onto the wall, where there's a view of the entire bay and the famous Isle of Thanet. How does that sound? Let's go." Carts rumbled past. Horses and oxen plodded. Coopers rolled barrels along the noisy street, and everyone was in a hurry. Ciri was a little bewildered by the bustle and commotion. She clumsily stepped off the wooden footpath and ended up ankle-deep in mud and muck. Fabio tried to take her arm, but she pulled away. "I don't need any help to walk." Of course not. Let's go then. We're in the main street here. It's called Cardo Street and connects the two gates, the main gate and the sea gate. You get to the town hall that way. Do you see the tower with the gold weather vane? That's the town hall. And there, where that colourful sign's hanging, that's a tavern called the Unlaced Corset. But we won't be going there. We're going over there. We'll take a shortcut through the fish market in Winding Street." They turned into a narrow street and came out into a small square squeezed between some buildings. It was full of stalls, barrels and vats, all strongly smelling of fish. The market was full of bustle and noise, with the stallholders and customers alike trying to outshout the seagulls circling above. There were cats sitting at the foot of the wall, pretending that the fish didn't interest them in the least. "Your mistress," said Fabio suddenly, weaving his way between the stalls, "is very strict." "I know. She isn't a close relative, is she? It's obvious right away." "Is it? How can you tell?" "She's very beautiful," said Fabio, with the cruel, casual frankness of a young person. Ciri turned away abruptly. But before she could treat Fabio to a stinging comment about his freckles or his height, the boy was pulling her between handcarts, barrels, and stalls, explaining all the time that the bastion towering above the square was called the Thief's Bastion, that the stones used for its construction came from the seabed, and that the trees growing at its foot were called plantains. "You're very quiet, Ciri," he suddenly said. "Me?" Ciri pretended to be astonished. "Not at all. I'm just listening carefully to what you're saying. It's all really interesting, you know, and I just wanted to ask you, fire away. Is it far to the city of Aretusa?" "It isn't far at all. Aretusa isn't even a city. We'll go up on the wall and I'll show you. Look, the steps are over there." The wall was high and the steps steep. Fabio was sweating and panting, and no small wonder, because he never stopped talking while they climbed. Ciri learned that the wall surrounding the city of Gorsvelen was a recent construction, much more recent than the city itself, which had been built long before by the Elves. She also found out it was 35 feet high, and that it was a so-called casemate wall, made of hewn stones and unfired brick, because that type of construction was the most resistant to blows from battering rams. At the top, they were greeted and fanned by a fresh sea wind. Ciri breathed it in joyfully after the heavy, stagnant stuffiness of the city. She rested her elbows on the top of the wall, looking down over the harbour, dotted with colourful sails. "What's that, Fabio? That mountain?" "That's the Isle of Thanedd." The island seemed very close, and it didn't resemble an island. It looked like the base of a gigantic stone column stuck into the seabed, a huge ziggurat encircled by a spirally twisting road and zigzagging steps and terraces. The terraces were green with groves and gardens, and protruding from the greenery, which clung to the rocks like swallows' nests, rose soaring white towers and the ornate domes of groups of buildings framed by cloisters. The buildings gave no clue at all that they had been constructed from stone. They seemed to have been carved directly from the mountain's rocky slopes. "All of this was built by elves," explained Fabio. "It's said they did it with the help of magic. However, for as long as anyone can remember, Thanedd has belonged to sorcerers. Near the summit, where you can see those gleaming domes, is Garstang Palace. The great conclave of mages will begin there in a few days. And there, look, on the very top, that solitary tower with battlements is Tor Lara, the Tower of Gulls. Can you get there over land? I can see it's very close." "Yes, you can. There's a bridge connecting the bay to the island. We can't see it because the trees are in the way. Do you see those red roofs at the foot of the mountain? That's Loxia Palace. The bridge ends there. You have to pass through Loxia to reach the road to the upper terraces. And those lovely cloisters and little bridges. And those gardens. How do they stay on the rock without falling off? What is that palace?" "That's Aretusa, the place you were asking about. The famous school for young enchantresses is there." "Oh," said Ciri, moistening her lips. "It's there." "Fabio?" "Yes?" "Do you ever see the young enchantresses who attend the school at Aretusa?" The boy looked at her, clearly astonished. "No, never. No one sees them. They aren't allowed to leave the island or visit the city. And no one has access to the school. Even the burgrave and the bailiff can only travel as far as Loxia if they have business for the enchantresses. It's on the lowest level." "That's what I thought." Ciri nodded, staring at Aretusa's shimmering roofs. "It's not a school. It's a prison, on an island, on a rock above a cliff. Quite simply, a prison." "I suppose it is," admitted Fabio after a moment's thought. "It's pretty difficult to get out of there. But no, it's not like being in prison. The novices are girls, after all. They need protecting. From what?" The boy stammered. I mean, you know what?" "No, I don't." "Oh, I think
Look, Ciri, no one locks them up in the school by force. They must want to be there. Of course, smiled Ciri mischievously. If they want to, they can stay in that prison. If they didn't, they wouldn't allow themselves to be locked up there. There's nothing to it. You just have to choose the right moment to make a break for it. But you'd have to do it before you end up there, because once you went in, it would be too late. What? Run away? Where would they run to? They, she interrupted, probably wouldn't have anywhere to go, the poor things. Fabio, where's that town? Hirundum?
The boy looked at her in surprise. Hirundum's not a town, he said. It's a huge farm. There are orchards and gardens there, which supply vegetables and fruit to all the towns and cities in the area. There are also fish ponds, where they breed carp and other fish.
How far is it from here to Hirundum? Which way is it? Show me. Why do you want to know? Just show me, will you?
Do you see that road leading westwards? Where those wagons are? That's the road to Hirundum. It's about 15 miles away, through forests all the way.
15 miles, repeated Ciri. Not far, if you've got a good horse.
Thank you, Fabio.
What are you thanking me for? Never mind. Now, take me to the town square. You promised.
Let's go. Ciri had never before seen such a crush and hubbub as there was in the market square in Gorsvelin. The noisy fish market they'd walked through a little earlier seemed like a quiet temple compared to this place. It was absolutely huge, but still so crowded that Ciri assumed they would only be able to look at it from a distance. There would be no chance of actually getting into it. Fabio, however, bravely forced his way into the seething crowd, pulling her along by the hand. Ciri felt dizzy at once. The market traders bellowed, the customers bellowed even louder, and children lost in the crowd howled and wailed. Cattle lowed, sheep bleated, and poultry clucked and quacked. Dwarven craftsmen doggedly banged their hammers onto sheets of metal, cursing foully whenever they interrupted their hammering to take a drink. Pipes, fiddles, and dulcimers could be heard from various parts of the square. Apparently some minstrels and musicians were performing. To cap it all, someone hidden in the crowd was blowing a brass trumpet incessantly. That someone was clearly not a musician. Dodging a pig that trotted past with a piercing squeal, Ciri fell against a cage of chickens. A moment later, she was jostled by a passer-by and trod on something soft that meowed. She jumped back and barely avoided being trampled on by a huge, smelly, revolting, fearsome-looking beast, shoving people aside with its shaggy flanks.
"What was that?"
she groaned, trying to regain her balance.
"Fabio? A camel. Don't be afraid." "I'm not afraid. The thought of it."
Ciri looked around curiously. She watched halflings at work, creating ornate wineskins from goat's hide in full view of the public, and she was delighted by the beautiful dolls on display at a stall run by a pair of half-elves. She looked at wares made of malachite and jasper, which a gruff, gloomy gnome was offering for sale. She inspected the swords in a swordsmith's workshop with interest and the eye of an expert. She watched girls weaving wicker baskets and concluded that there was nothing worse than work. The hornblower stopped blowing. Someone had probably killed him.
"What smells so delicious around here?"
"Doughnuts," said Fabio, feeling the pouch.
"Do you wish to eat one? I wish to eat 2.
The vendor handed them 3 doughnuts, took the 5-groat piece, and gave them 4 coppers in change, one of which he broke in half. Ciri, slowly regaining her poise, watched the operation of the coin being broken, while voraciously devouring the first doughnut.
"Is that," she asked, getting started on the second, "where the expression, 'not worth a broken groat,' comes from?"
"That's right," said Fabio, swallowing his doughnut. "There aren't any smaller coins than groats."
"Don't people use half-groats where you come from?"
"No."
Ciri licked her fingers. "Where I come from, we used gold ducats. And anyway, all that breaking business was stupid and pointless."
"Why?"
"Because I wish to eat a 3rd doughnut."
The plum jam-filled doughnuts acted like the most miraculous elixir. Ciri was now in a good mood, and the teeming square had stopped terrifying her, and had even begun to please her. Now she didn't let Fabio drag her behind him, but pulled him into the biggest crowd herself, towards a place where someone on a makeshift rostrum built of barrels was addressing the crowd. The speaker was fat and a bit past it. Ciri recognized him as a wandering priest by his shaved head and greyish-brown robes. She had seen his kind before, as they would occasionally visit the temple of Melitele in Elender. Mother Nenneker never referred to them as anything other than fanatical chumps.
"There is but one law in the world," roared the podgy priest. "Divine law. The whole of nature is subject to that law, the whole of earth and everything that lives on the earth, and spells and magic are contrary to that law. Thus are sorcerers damned, and close is the day of wrath, when fire will pour from the heavens and destroy their vile island. Then down will come the walls of Loxia, Aretusa, and Garstang, where those pagans are gathering to hatch their intrigues. Those walls will tumble down,
and we'll have to build the sodding things again," muttered a journeyman bricklayer in a lime-spattered smock standing next to Ciri.
"I admonish you all, good and pious people," yelled the priest. "Don't believe the sorcerers. Don't turn to them for advice or aid. Be beguiled neither by their beautiful looks nor their clever speech. For verily I do say to you that those magicians are like whitened graves, beautiful on the outside, but full of putrefaction and rotten bones on the inside."
"See what a powerful gob he has on him,"
remarked a young woman with a basket full of carrots.
"He's having a go at the magicians because he's jealous of them, and that's that."
"Course he is," said the bricklayer. "Look at his noggin. He's bald as an egg, and that belly hangs down to his knees. On the other hand, sorcerers are handsome. They don't get fat or bald, and sorceresses, well, they're just gorgeous."
"Only because they sold their souls to the devil for their beauty,"
yelled a short individual with a shoemaker's hammer stuck into his belt. "Fool of a cobbler! Were it not for the ladies of Aretusa, you'd long since have gone begging. Thanks to them, you've got food in your belly." Fabio pulled Ciri by the sleeve, and they plunged once more into the crowd, which carried them towards the middle of the square. They heard the pounding of a drum and loud shouting, calling for silence. The crowd had no intention of being quiet, but it didn't bother the town crier on the wooden platform in the least. He had a powerful, trained voice, and knew how to use it.
"Let it be known,"
he bellowed, unfurling a roll of parchment,
"that Hugo Ansbach, of halfling stock, is outlawed, for he gave lodgings and victuals to those villainous elves called squirrels. The same applies to Justin Ingvar, a blacksmith of dwarven stock, who forged arrowheads for those wrongdoers. Thus does the Burgrave announce that both are wanted and orders them to be hunted down. Whosoever seizes them will earn a reward of 50 crowns. Any who gives them victuals or shelter shall be considered an accomplice to their crime and shall suffer the same punishment. And should they be apprehended in a village or hamlet, the entire village or hamlet will pay a fine."
"But who,"
shouted someone in the crowd,
"will give a halfling shelter? They should be hunted on their farms, and when they're found, all those non-humans should be slung into the dungeons."
"To the gallows, not the dungeons." The town crier began to read further announcements issued by the Burgrave and town council, and Ciri lost interest. She was just about to extricate herself from the crowd when she suddenly felt a hand on her bottom. A totally non-accidental, brazen, and extremely skilled hand. The crush ought to have prevented her from turning around to look, but in Kaer Morhen, Ciri had learned how to manoeuvre in places that were difficult to move around in. She turned around, causing something of a disturbance. The young priest with the shaved head, standing right behind her, smiled an arrogant, rehearsed smile. "Right then," said that smile, "what are we going to do now? You'll blush sweetly, and that'll be the end of it, won't it?" It was clear the priest had never had to deal with one of Yennefer's pupils.
"Keep your hands to yourself, Baldy,"
yelled Ciri, white with rage.
"Grab your own arse, you whitewashed tomb."
Taking advantage of the fact that the priest was pinned in by the crowd and couldn't move, she intended to kick him, but Fabio prevented that, hurriedly pulling her well away from the priest and the site of the incident. Seeing that she was trembling with rage, he treated her to a few fritters dusted with caster sugar, at the sight of which Ciri immediately calmed down and forgot about the incident. From where they were standing by the stall, they had a view of a scaffold with a pillory, but with no criminal in it. The scaffold itself was decorated with garlands of flowers, and was being used by a group of wandering minstrels, dressed up like parrots, sawing away vigorously at violins and playing flutes and bagpipes. A young black-haired woman, in a sequined waistcoat, sang and danced, shaking a tambourine and merrily stamping tiny slippers. To bite a witch beside the path some vipers did contrive, the snakes all perished one by one, the witch is still alive. The crowd gathered around the scaffold laughed heartily and clapped along. The fritter seller threw another batch into the hot oil. Fabio licked his fingers and tugged Ciri away by the sleeve. There were innumerable stalls and delicious foods were being offered everywhere. They each ate a cream bun, then shared a smoked eel, which they followed with something very strange, which had been fried and impaled on a skewer. After that, they stopped by some barrels of sauerkraut and pretended to be tasting it, as if intending to buy a large quantity. When they had eaten their fill, but then didn't buy anything, the stallholder called them a pair of little shits. They walked on. Fabio bought a small basket of bergamot pears with the rest of the money. Ciri looked up at the sky, but decided it still wasn't noon.
Fabio, what are those tents and booths over there by the wall? Sideshows. Want to see?
Yes. There was a crowd of men in front of the first tent, shuffling about excitedly. The sounds of a flute floated out from inside. The black-skinned Layla, read Ciri, struggling to decipher the lopsided crooked writing on the flap, reveals all the secrets of her body in the dance. What nonsense! What kind of secrets? Come on, let's go, said Fabio, urging her on and blushing slightly. Oh, look, this is more interesting. There's a clairvoyant here who'll tell your fortune. I've still got 2 groats. That should be enough. Waste of money, snorted Ciri. Some prophecy it'll be for 2 groats. To predict the future, you have to be a prophetess. Divination is a great gift. Even among enchantresses, no more than 1 in 100 has that kind of ability. A fortune teller predicted, interrupted the boy, that my elder sister would get married, and it came true. Don't make faces, Ciri. Come on, let's have our fortunes told. I don't want to get married. I don't want my fortune told. It's hot, and that tent stinks of incense. I'm not going in. Go in yourself if you want, and I'll wait. I just don't understand why you want a prophecy. What would you like to know? Well, stammered Fabio, mostly it's if I'm going to travel. I'd like to travel and see the whole world. He will, thought Ciri suddenly, feeling dizzy. He'll sail on great white sailing ships. He'll sail to countries no one has seen before him. Fabio Sachs, explorer. He'll give his name to a cape to the very furthest point of an as-yet unnamed continent. When he's 54, married with a son and 3 daughters, he'll die far from his home and his loved ones, of an as-yet unnamed disease. Ciri, what's the matter with you? She rubbed her face. She felt as though she were coming up through water, rising to the surface from the bottom of a deep, ice-cold lake. It's nothing, she mumbled, looking around and coming back to herself. I felt dizzy. It's because of this heat, and because of that incense from the tent. Because of that cabbage, more like, said Fabio seriously. We oughtn't to have eaten so much. My belly's gurgling too. There's nothing wrong with me, snapped Ciri, lifting her head briskly and actually feeling better. The thoughts that had flown through her mind like a whirlwind dissipated and were lost in oblivion. Come on, Fabio, let's go. Do you want a pair? Course I do. A group of teenage boys were playing spinning tops for money. The top, carefully wound up with string, had to be set spinning with a deft tug, like cracking a whip, to make it follow a circular path around a course drawn with chalk. Ciri had beaten most of the boys in Skellige, and all the novices at the Temple of Melita are at spinning tops, so she was toying with the thought of joining the game and relieving the urchins not only of their coppers, but also of their patched breeches, when her attention was suddenly caught by some loud cheering. At the very end of a row of tents and booths stood a curious semicircular enclosure squeezed between the foot of the wall and some stone steps. It was formed from sheets of canvas stretched over 6-foot poles. There was an entrance between two of the poles, blocked by a tall, pock-marked man, wearing a jerkin and striped trousers tucked into sailor's boots. A small group of people milled around in front of him, and folk would throw a few coppers into the pock-marked man's hand and then disappear behind the canvas. The pock-marked man was dropping the money into a large sack, which he jingled as he shouted hoarsely.
Roll up, over here. You will see, with your own eyes, the most frightful creature the gods ever created. Horror of horrors, a live basilisk, the venomous terror of the Zerican deserts, the devil incarnate, an insatiable man-eater. You've never seen such a monster, folks. Freshly caught, brought from beyond the seas in a coracle. Come and see this vicious, live basilisk with your own eyes, because you'll never see one again. Not never, not nowhere. Last chance. Here, behind me, for a mere 15 groats. Just 10 groats for women with children.
Ha! Said Ciri, shooing wasps away from the pears. A basilisk? A live one? This I must see. I've only seen them in books. Come on, Fabio. I haven't got any more money, but I have. I'll pay for you. Come on, in we go.
That'll be 6, said the pockmarked man,
looking down at the 4 coppers in his palm.
3 5-groat pieces each. Only women with children get in cheap.
He, replied Ciri, pointing at Fabio with a pear, is a child, and I'm a woman.
Only women carrying children, growled the pockmarked man. Go on, chuck in 2 more 5-groat pieces, clever little miss, or scram and let other people through. Make haste, folks! Only 3 more empty spaces.
Inside the canvas enclosure, townspeople were milling around, forming a solid ring around a stage constructed of wooden planks. On the stage stood a wooden cage covered with a carpet. Having let in the final spectators, the pockmarked man jumped onto the stage, seized a long pole, and used it to pull the carpet away. The air filled with the smell of offal mixed with an unpleasant reptilian stench. The spectators rumbled and stepped back a little.
You are being sensible, good people, said the pockmarked man. Not too close, for it may be perilous.
Inside the cage, which was far too cramped for it, lay a lizard. It was covered in dark, strangely shaped scales and curled up into a ball. When the pockmarked man knocked the cage with his pole, the reptile writhed, grated its scales against the bars, extended its long neck, and let out a piercing hiss, revealing sharp white fangs, which contrasted vividly with the almost black scales around its maw. The spectators exhaled audibly. A shaggy little dog in the arms of a woman who looked like a stall-holder yapped shrilly.
Look carefully, good people, called the pockmarked man, and be glad that beasts like this don't live near our city. This monstrous basilisk is from distant Zericania. Don't come any closer, because though it's secure in a cage, its breath alone could poison you.
Ciri and Fabio finally pushed their way through the ring of spectators.
The basilisk, continued the pockmarked man on stage, resting on the pole like a guard leaning on his halberd, is the most venomous beast in the world, for the basilisk is the king of all the serpents. Were there more basilisks, this world would disappear without a trace. Fortunately, it is a most rare monster. It only ever hatches from an egg laid by a cockerel. And you know yourselves that not every cockerel can lay an egg, but only a knavish one, who presents his rump to another cockerel in the manner of a mother hen.
The spectators reacted with general laughter to this superior, or possibly posterior, joke. The only person not laughing was Ciri. She didn't take her eyes off the creature, which, disturbed by the noise, was writhing and banging against the bars of the cage, biting them, and vainly trying to spread its wings in the cramped space.
An egg laid by a cockerel like that, continued the pockmarked man, must be brooded by 101 venomous snakes, and when the basilisk hatches from the egg—
That isn't a basilisk, said Ciri, chewing a bergamot pear. The pockmarked man looked at her askance.
When the basilisk hatches, I was saying, he continued, then it devours all the snakes in the nest, imbibing their venom without suffering any harm from it. It becomes so swollen with venom itself that it is able to kill not only with its teeth, not only with its touch, but with its breath alone, and when a mounted knight ups and stabs a basilisk with his spear, the poison runs up the shaft, killing both rider and horse outright."
"That's the falsest lie," said Ciri aloud, spitting out a pip.
"It's the truest truth," protested the pockmarked man. "He kills them. He kills the horse and its rider."
"Yeah, right."
"Be quiet, miss," shouted the market trader with the dog. "Don't interfere. We want to marvel and listen."
"Ciri, stop it," whispered Fabio, nudging her in the ribs. Ciri snorted at him, reaching into the basket for another pear.
"Every animal,"
said the pockmarked man, raising his voice against the murmur, which was intensifying among the spectators,
"flees the basilisk as soon as it hears its hiss. Every animal, even a dragon, what am I saying? Even a crocodile, and a crocodile is awfully dreadful, as anyone who's seen one knows. The one and only animal that doesn't fear the basilisk is the marten. The marten, when it sees the monster in the wilderness, runs as fast as it can into the forest, looks for certain herbs known only to it and eats them. Then the basilisk's venom is harmless, and the marten can bite it to death."
Ciri snorted with laughter, and made a long, drawn-out, extremely rude noise with her lips.
"Hey, little know-it-all," burst out the pockmarked man. "If it's not to your liking, you know where the door is. No one's forcing you to listen or to look at the basilisk."
"That's no basilisk."
"Oh, yeah, so what is it, Miss Know-it-all?"
"It's a wyvern," said Ciri, throwing away the pear stalk and licking her fingers. "It's a common wyvern, young, small, starving and dirty. But a wyvern, that's all. Viverne, in the elder speech."
"Oh, look at this!" shouted the pockmarked man. "What a clever clogs! Shut your trap, because when I
say," spoke up a fair-haired young man in a velvet beret and a squire's doublet without a coat of arms. He had a delicate, pale girl in an apricot dress on his arm. "Not so fast, my good animal catcher. Do not threaten the noble lady, for I will readily tan your hide with my sword, and furthermore, something smacks of trickery here."
"What trickery, young Sir Knight?" choked the pockmarked man. "She's lying, the high-born young lady is in error. It is a basilisk."
"It's a wyvern," repeated Ciri.
"What do you mean, a vernon? It's a basilisk. Just look how menacing it is, how it hisses, how it bites at its cage. Look at those teeth. It's got teeth, I tell you, like
a wyvern," scowled Ciri.
"If you've taken leave of your senses," said the pockmarked man, fixing her with a gaze that a real basilisk would have been proud of, "then come closer. Step up and let it breathe on you. You laughed at its venom. Now let's see you croak. Come along, step up."
"Not a problem," said Ciri, pulling her arm out of Fabio's grasp and taking a step forward. "I shan't allow it," cried the fair-haired squire, dropping his apricot companion's arm and blocking Ciri's way. "It cannot be. You are risking too much, fair lady." Ciri, who had never been addressed like that before, blushed a little, looked at the young man, and fluttered her eyelids in a way she had tried out numerous times on the scribe Jara. "There's no risk whatsoever, noble knight." She smiled seductively, in spite of all Yennefer's warnings and reminders about the fable of the simpleton gazing foolishly at the cheese. "Nothing will happen to me. That so-called poisonous breath is claptrap." "I would, however, like to stand beside you," said the youth, putting his hand on the hilt of his sword, "to protect and defend. Will you allow me?" "I will," said Ciri, not knowing why the expression of rage on the apricot maiden's face was causing her such pleasure. "It is I who shall protect and defend her," said Fabio, sticking his chest out and looking at the squire defiantly. "And I shall stand with her too." "Gentlemen," Ciri puffed herself up with pride and stuck her nose in the air. "A little more dignity. Don't shove. There'll be room enough for everyone." The ring of spectators swayed and murmured as she bravely approached the cage, followed so closely by the boys that she could almost feel their breath on her neck. The wyvern hissed furiously and struggled, its reptilian stench assaulting their noses. Fabio gasped loudly, but Ciri didn't withdraw. She drew even closer and held out a hand, almost touching the cage. The monster,
hurled itself at the bars, raking them with its teeth. The crowd swayed once more, and someone cried out.
Well?
Ciri turned around, hands proudly on her hips.
Did I die? Has that so-called venomous monster poisoned me? He's no more a basilisk than I'm a—
She broke off, seeing the sudden paleness on the faces of Fabio and the squire. She turned around quickly, and saw 2 bars of the cage parting under the force of the enraged lizard, tearing rusty nails out of the frame.
"Run!"
she shouted at the top of her voice.
"The cage is breaking!"
The crowd rushed screaming for the door. Several of them tried to tear their way through the canvas sheeting, but they only managed to entangle themselves and others in it, eventually collapsing into a struggling, yelling mass of humanity. Just as Ciri was trying to jump out of the way, the squire seized her arm, and the 2 of them staggered, tripped and fell to the ground, taking Fabio down with them. Anxious yaps came from the stallholder's shaggy little dog, colourful swear words from the pockmarked man, and piercing shrieks from the disorientated apricot maiden. The bars of the cage broke with a crack, and the wyvern struggled free. The pockmarked man jumped down from the stage and tried to restrain it with his pole, but the writhing monster knocked it out of his hand with one blow of its claws and lashed him with its spiny tail, transforming his pockmarked cheek into a bloody pulp. Hissing and spreading its tattered wings, the wyvern flew down from the stage. Its sights were set on Ciri, Fabio, and the squire, who were trying to get to their feet. The apricot maiden fainted and fell flat on her back. Ciri tensed, preparing to jump, but realized she wouldn't make it. They were saved by the shaggy little dog, who, still yapping shrilly, broke free from its owner's arms. She had fallen and become entangled in her own 6 skirts, and lunged at the monster. The wyvern hissed, rose up, pinned the cur down with its talons, twisted its body with a swift serpentine movement, and sank its teeth into the dog's neck. The dog howled wildly. The squire struggled to his knees and reached down to his side, but didn't find his hilt. Ciri had been too quick for him. She had drawn his sword from its scabbard in a lightning-fast movement and leapt into a half-turn. The wyvern rose, the dog's severed head hanging in its sharp-toothed jaws. It seemed to Ciri that all the movements she had learned in Caer Morhen were performing themselves, almost without her conscious will or participation. She slashed the astonished wyvern in the belly, and immediately spun away to avoid it. The lunging lizard fell to the sand, spurting blood. Ciri jumped over it, skillfully avoiding its swishing tail. Then, with a sure, accurate, and powerful blow, she hacked into the monster's neck, jumped back, and made an instinctive, but now unnecessary, evasive manoeuvre, and then struck again at once, this time chopping through its backbone. The wyvern writhed briefly in pain, and then stopped moving. Only its serpentine tail continued to thrash and slap the ground, raining sand all around. Ciri quickly shoved the bloodied sword into the squire's hand. "Danger over!" she shouted to the fleeing crowd and the spectators, still trying to extricate themselves from the canvas sheeting. "The monster's dead! This brave knight has killed him dead!" She suddenly felt a tightening in her throat and a whirling in her stomach. Everything went black. Something hit her in the bottom with tremendous force, making her teeth snap together. She looked around blankly. The thing that had struck her was the ground. "Ciri," whispered Fabio, kneeling beside her. "What's the matter? By the gods, you're as white as a sheet." "It's a pity," she muttered. "You can't see yourself." People crowded around. Several of them prodded the wyvern's body with sticks and pokers. A few of them began dressing the pockmarked man's wounds. The rest cheered the heroic squire, the fearless dragon killer, the only person to keep a cool head and prevent a massacre. The squire revived the apricot maiden, still staring somewhat dumbstruck at the blade of his sword, which was covered with smeared streaks of drying blood. "My hero," said the apricot maiden, coming to and throwing her arms around the squire's neck. "My saviour, my darling." "Fabio," said Ciri weakly, seeing the city constables pushing through the crowd. "Help me get up and get us out of here, quickly." "Poor children," said a fat townswoman in a cap, as she watched them sneak away from the crowd.
Oh, you were lucky. Were it not for this valiant young knight, your mothers would be sorely grieving.
Find out who that young squire serves, shouted a craftsman in a leather apron. That deed deserves a knightly belt and spurs. Add to the pillory with the animal catcher. He deserves a thrashing, bringing a monster like that into the city among people.
Water, and quickly! The maiden's fainted again. My darling Foo-Foo!
The stall-holder suddenly howled, as she leaned over what was left of the shaggy little dog.
My poor little sweetheart! Someone, please! Catch that wench, that rascal who infuriated the dragon. Where is she? Someone grab her. It wasn't the animal catcher. She's to blame for all this.
The city constables, helped by numerous volunteers, began to shove their way through the crowd and look around. Ciri had overcome her dizziness.
Fabio, she whispered, let's split up. We'll meet up in a bit in that alleyway we came along. Go, and if anyone stops you to ask, you don't know me or anything about me. But, Ciri, go!
She squeezed Yennefer's amulet in her fist and murmured the activation spell. It started working in an instant, and there was no time to lose. The constables, who had been forcing their way through the crowd towards her, stopped, confused.
What the bloody hell?
Said one of them in astonishment, looking, it would have seemed, straight at Ciri.
Where is she? I just saw her. There! Over there!
Yelled another, pointing the wrong way. Ciri turned around and walked away, still a little dazed and weakened by the rush of adrenaline and the activation of the amulet. The amulet was working perfectly. No one could see her, and no one was paying any attention to her. Absolutely no one. As a consequence, she was jostled, stamped on, and kicked innumerable times before she finally extricated herself from the crowd. By some miracle, she escaped being crushed by a chest thrown from a cart. She almost had an eye poked out by a pitchfork. Spells, it turned out, had their good and bad sides, and as many advantages as disadvantages. The amulet's effects did not last long. Ciri was not powerful enough to control it or extend the time the spell was active. Fortunately, the spell wore off at the right moment, just as she left the crowd and saw Fabio waiting for her in the alley.
Oh my,
said the boy.
Oh my goodness, Ciri. You're here. I was worried. You needn't have been. Come on, quickly. Noon has passed. I've got to get back.
You were pretty handy with that monster. The boy looked at her in admiration. You moved like lightning. Where did you learn to do that?
What? The squire killed the wyvern.
That's not true.
I thought you didn't see anything. Please, Fabio, not a word to anyone, and particularly not to Madame Yennefer. Oh, I'd be in for it if she found out.
She fell silent.
Those people were right.
She pointed behind her, towards the market square.
I provoked the wyvern. It was all my fault.
No, it wasn't, retorted Fabio firmly.
That cage was rotten and bodged together. It could have broken any second, in an hour,
tomorrow, the next day.
It's better that it happened now, because you saved— The squire did, yelled Ciri. The squire! Will you finally get that into your head? I'm telling you, if you grass me up, I'll turn you into— well, something horrible. And no spells. I'll turn you into—
Stop! Someone called out behind them. That's quite enough of that. One of the women walking behind them had dark, smoothly combed hair, shining eyes and thin lips. She had a short, mauve kamaka cape trimmed with dormouse fur thrown over her shoulders.
Why aren't you in school, novice?
She asked in a cold, resonant voice, eyeing Ciri with a penetrating gaze.
Wait, Tisaya,
said the other woman, who was younger, tall and fair-haired, and wore a green dress with a plunging neckline.
I don't know her. I don't think she's—
Yes, she is,
interrupted the dark-haired woman.
I'm certain she's one of your girls, Rita. You can't know them all. She's one of the ones who sneaked out of Loxia during the confusion when we were moving dormitories, and she'll admit as much in a moment. Well, novice, I'm waiting.
What? frowned Ciri. The woman pursed her thin lips and straightened her cups.
Who did you steal that amulet of concealment from, or did someone give it to you?
What?
Don't test my patience. Name, class, and the name of your preceptress, quickly.
What?
Are you acting dumb, novice?
Your name. What is your name?
Ciri clenched her teeth together, and her eyes flared with a green glow.
Anna Ingeborga Klopstock,
she muttered brazenly. The woman raised a hand, and Ciri immediately realized the full extent of her error. Only once had Yennefer, wearied by Ciri's endless complaining, showed her how a paralyzing spell worked. The sensation had been extremely unpleasant. It was the same this time, too. Fabio yelled weakly and lunged towards her, but the fair-haired woman seized him by the collar and held him fast. The boy struggled, but the woman's grip was like iron. Ciri couldn't budge an inch either. She felt as though she was slowly becoming rooted to the spot. The dark-haired woman leaned over her and fixed her with shining eyes.
I do not approve of corporal punishment, she said icily, straightening her cuffs once more. But I'll do my best to have you flogged, novice. Not for disobedience, nor for theft, nor for truancy. Not because you are wearing non-regulation clothing, not for being in the company of a boy, and not even for talking to him about matters you are forbidden to speak of. You will be flogged for not recognizing an arch-mistress.
No,
shrieked Fabio.
Don't harm her, noble lady. I'm a clerk in Mr. Molnar Giancardi's bank, and this young lady is— Shut up,
yelled Ciri.
Shut!
The gagging spell was cast quickly and brutally. She tasted blood in her mouth. Well, the fair-haired woman urged Fabio, releasing the boy and tenderly smoothing his ruffled collar. Speak. Who is this haughty young maid? Margherita Losantile emerged from the pool with a splash, spraying water everywhere. Ciri couldn't stop herself looking. She had seen Yennefer naked on several occasions, and hadn't imagined anyone could have a more shapely figure. She was wrong. Even marble statues of goddesses and nymphs would have blushed at the sight of Margherita Losantile undressed. The enchantress took a pail of cold water and poured it over her breasts, swearing lewdly, and then shaking herself off. You, girl, she beckoned to Ciri. Be so good as to hand me a towel, and please stop being angry with me. Ciri snorted quietly, still piqued. When Fabio had revealed who she was, the enchantresses had dragged her half the length of the city, making a laughing-stock of her. Naturally, the matter was cleared up instantly in Giancardi's bank. The enchantresses apologized to Yennefer, asking for their behavior to be excused. They explained that the Aretusa novices had been temporarily moved to Loxia because the school's rooms had been turned into accommodation for the participants of the Mages' Conclave. Taking advantage of the confusion around the move, several novices had slipped out of Thanev and played truant in the city. Margherita Losantile and Tissaia de Vries, alarmed by the activation of Ciri's amulet, had mistaken her for one of their truants. The enchantresses apologized to Yennefer, but none of them thought of apologizing to Ciri. Yennefer, listening to the apologies, simply looked at her, and Ciri could feel her ears burning with shame. But it was worse for Fabio. Molnar Giancardi admonished him so severely the boy had tears in his eyes. Ciri felt sorry for him, but was also proud of him. Fabio kept his promise, and didn't breathe a word about the wyvern. Yennefer, it turned out, knew Tissaia and Margherita very well. The enchantresses invited her to the Silver Heron, the best and most expensive inn in Gorsvelen, where Tissaia de Vries was staying, delaying her trip to the island for reasons known only to herself. Margherita Losantile, who, it turned out, was the rectoress of Aretusa, had accepted the older enchantress's invitation, and was temporarily sharing the apartment with her. The inn was truly luxurious. It had its own bathhouse in the cellars, which Margherita and Tissaia had hired for their exclusive use, paying extortionate sums of money for it. Yennefer and Ciri, of course, were encouraged to use the bathhouse too. As a result, all of them had been soaking in the pool and perspiring in the steam by turns for several hours, gossiping the entire time. Ciri gave the enchantress a towel. Margherita pinched her gently on the cheek. Ciri snorted again and dived with a splash into the rosemary-perfumed water of the pool. She swims like a young seal, laughed Margherita, stretching out beside Yennefer on a wooden lounger, and is as shapely as a naiad.
Will you give her to me, Yenna? That's why I brought her here. Which class shall I put her in? Does she know the basics? She does, but she can start at the beginning like everyone else. It won't do her any harm.
That would be wise, said Tissaia de Vries, busily correcting the arrangement of cups on the marble tabletop, which was covered in a thin layer of condensation. That would be wise indeed, Yennefer. The girl will find it easier if she begins with the other novices. Ciri hauled herself out of the pool and sat on the edge, wringing her hair out and splashing her feet in the water. Yennefer and Margarita gossiped lazily, wiping their faces from time to time with cloths soaked in cold water. Tissaia, modestly swathed in a sheet, didn't join in the conversation and gave the impression of being utterly absorbed in tidying the objects on the table.
"My humble apologies, noble ladies,"
called the innkeeper, suddenly unseen from above.
Please forgive my daring to disturb, but an officer wishes to talk to Madame de Vries urgently. Apparently the matter will brook no delay."
Margarita Losantilla giggled and winked at Yennefer, upon which they pulled the towels from their hips and assumed exotic and extremely provocative poses.
"Let the officer enter,"
shouted Margarita, trying not to laugh.
"Welcome. We're ready."
"Children," sighed Tissaia de Vries, shaking her head. "Cover yourself, Ciri." The officer came in, but the enchantress's prank misfired. The officer wasn't embarrassed at the sight of them, and didn't blush, gape, or goggle, because the officer was a woman. A tall, slender woman, with a thick black plait and a sword at her side. "Madam," said the woman stiffly, her hauberk clanking as she gave Tissaia de Vries a slight bow, "I report the execution of your instructions. I would like to ask for permission to return to the garrison." "You may," replied Tissaia curtly. "Thank you for the escort and your help. Have a safe journey." Yennefer sat up on her lounger, looking at the black, gold, and red rosette on the soldier's shoulder.
"Do I know you?"
The warrior bowed stiffly and wiped her sweat-covered face. It was hot in the bathhouse, and she was wearing a hauberk and leather tunic. "I often used to visit Vengerberg, Madame Yennefer," she said. "My name is Rayla."
"Judging by the rosette, you serve in King Demavend's special units."
"Yes, madam."
"Your rank?"
"Captain."
"Very good."
Margarita Losantilla laughed. "I note with pleasure that Demavend's army has finally begun to award commissions to soldiers with balls." "May I withdraw?" said the soldier, standing up straight and resting her hand on the hilt of her sword. "You may."
"I sensed hostility in your voice, Yenna," said Margarita a moment later.
"What do you have against the captain?" Yennefer stood up and took 2 goblets from the table.
"Did you see the posts by the crossroads?" she asked. "You must have seen them, must have smelled the stench of rotting corpses. Those posts are their idea and their work. She and her subordinates from the special units. They're a gang of sadists. There's a war on, Yennefer. Rayla must have seen her comrades in arms falling alive into the squirrels' clutches many times, then hung by their arms from trees as target practice, blinded, castrated, with their feet burnt in campfires. Volker herself wouldn't have been ashamed of the atrocities committed by the Scoia'tael. The methods of the special units are remarkably similar to those of Volker, but that's not the point, Rita. I'm not getting sentimental about the fate of Elves, and I know what war is. I know how wars are won, too. They're won by soldiers who fight for their countries and homes with conviction and sacrifice. Not by soldiers like her, by mercenaries fighting for money who are unable and unwilling to sacrifice themselves. They don't even know what sacrifice is, and if they do, they despise it. To hell with her, her dedication and her contempt. What does it matter to us? Ciri, throw something decent on, pop upstairs and fetch us another carafe. I feel like getting drunk today. Tissaia de Vries sighed, shaking her head. It didn't escape Margarita's attention. Fortunately, she giggled, we aren't at school any longer, mistress dear. We can do what we want now. Even in the presence of a future novice? Asked Tissaia scathingly. When I was rectoress at Aretusa. We remember, interrupted Yennefer with a smile. And even if we'd prefer to forget, we never will. Go and fetch that carafe, Ciri. Upstairs, waiting for the carafe, Ciri witnessed the officer depart with her squad of 4 soldiers.
She watched their posture, expressions, clothing and arms in fascination and admiration. Right then, Rayla, the captain with the black plait, was arguing with the innkeeper. "I'm not going to wait until daybreak, and I couldn't give a damn if the gates are locked. I want to leave immediately. I know the inn has its own postern in the stables. I order it to be opened." "But the regulations—" "I don't give a damn about the regulations. I'm carrying out the orders of Archmistress de Vries." All right, Captain, don't shout. I'll open up." The postern, it turned out, was in a narrow, securely gated passageway leading straight beyond the city walls. Before Ciri took the carafe from the servant's hands, she saw the postern being opened and Rayla and her unit riding out into the night. Ciri was deep in thought. "Oh, at last," said Margarita cheerfully, though it was unclear whether she was referring to the sight of Ciri or the carafe she was carrying. Ciri put the carafe on the table, very clearly wrongly, because Tissaia de Vries repositioned it at once. When Yennefer poured, she spoiled the entire arrangement too, and Tissaia had to put it right again. Imagining Tissaia as a teacher filled Ciri with dread. Yennefer and Margarita returned to their interrupted conversation, not sparing the contents of the carafe. Ciri realized it wouldn't be long before she would have to go and get a fresh one. She pondered, listening to the enchantress's discussion. "No, Yenna." Margarita shook her head. "You aren't up to speed, I see. I've dumped Lars. That's history. Elaine de Rea, as the elves would say." "And that's why you want to get drunk?" "That's one of the reasons," confirmed Margarita Lozantila. "I'm sad. I can't hide it. I was with him for 4 years, after all. But I had to dump him. It was hopeless." "Particularly," snorted Tissaia de Vries, staring at the golden wine as she swilled it around her cup, "since Lars was married." "I consider that of no importance," said the enchantress, shrugging. "All the attractive men of a certain age and who interest me are married. I can't help that. Lars loved me, and I would add, loved me for quite some time. Oh, what can I say? He wanted too much. He jeopardized my freedom, and the thought of monogamy makes me sick. And after all, I was only following your example, Yenna. Do you remember that conversation in Vengerberg, when you decided to break up with that Witcher of yours? I advised you then to think twice. I told you, you can't find love in the street. But you were right. Love is love, and life is life. Love passes." "Don't listen to her, Yennefer," said Tissaia coldly. "She's bitter and full of regrets. Do you know why she's not going to the banquet at Arethusa? Because she's ashamed to show up alone, without the man she's been involved with for 4 years. The man people envied her for, who she lost because she was unable to value his love." "Perhaps we could talk about something else," suggested Yennefer, in an apparently carefree but slightly altered voice. "Ciri, pour us some wine. Oh, hell, a carafe small. Be so kind as to bring us another." "Bring 2, laughed Margarita, "and as a reward you'll get a sip and be able to sit with us. You won't have to strain your ears from a distance. Your education can begin here, right now, before you join me at Arethusa." "Education?" Tissaia raised her eyes to the ceiling. "By the gods!" "Oh, do be quiet, beloved mistress," said Margarita, slapping a hand against her wet thigh, pretending to be angry. "I'm the rectoress of the school now. You didn't manage to flunk me during the final exams." "I regret that." "I do, too. Just imagine, I'd have a private practice now, like Yenna. I wouldn't have to sweat with novices. I wouldn't have to wipe the noses of the blubbering ones or lock horns with the cheeky ones. Ciri, listen to me and learn. An enchantress always takes action, wrongly or rightly, that is revealed later. But you should act, be brave, seize life by the scruff of the neck. Believe me, little one, you should only regret inactivity, indecisiveness, hesitation. You shouldn't regret actions or decisions, even if they occasionally end in sadness and regret. Look at that serious lady sitting there, pulling faces and pedantically correcting everything in sight. That's Tissaia de Vries, Archmistress, who has educated dozens of enchantresses, teaching them how to act, teaching them that indecision— "Enough, Rita." "Tissaia's right," said Yennefer, still staring into the corner of the bathhouse. "Stop.
I know you're feeling low because of Lars, but don't moralize. The girl still has time for that kind of learning, and she won't receive it in school. Ciri, go and get another carafe. Ciri stood up. She was completely dressed, and her mind was utterly made up.
What?
Yennefer shrieked. What do you mean she's gone?
She ordered me,
mumbled the innkeeper, pale, with his back pressed against the wall.
She ordered me to saddle a horse.
And you obeyed her, rather than ask us?
Madam, how was I to know? I was sure she was leaving on your orders. It never once occurred to me.
You damned fool! Take it easy, Yennefer, said Tissaia, pressing a hand against her forehead. Don't succumb to your emotions. It's night. They won't let her through the gate.
She ordered the postern opened, whispered the innkeeper.
And was it?
Because of the conclave, madam, said the innkeeper, lowering his eyes. The city is full of sorcerers. People are afraid. No one dares to get in their way. How could I refuse her? She spoke just like you do, madam, in exactly the same tone, and she looked the same way. No one even dared to look her in the eye, never mind ask a question. She was like you. The spitting image. She even ordered a quill and ink and wrote a letter.
Hand it over. Tissaia de Vries was quicker and read aloud.
Madam Yennefer, forgive me. I'm riding to Hirundum because I want to see Geralt. I want to see him before I start school. Forgive my disobedience, but I must. I know you'll punish me, but I don't want to regret my indecision and hesitation. If I'm to have regrets, let them be for deeds and actions. I'm an enchantress. I seize life by the scruff of the neck. I'll return when I can. Ciri.
Is that all?
There's also a postscript. Tell Madam Rita she won't have to wipe my nose at school.
Margarita Lozantila shook her head in disbelief as Yennefer cursed. The innkeeper flushed and opened his mouth. He'd heard many curses in his life, but never that one. The wind blew from the land towards the sea. Waves of cloud drifted over the moon, suspended over the forest. The road to Hirundum was plunged into darkness, making galloping too dangerous. Ciri slowed to a trot, but she didn't consider slowing to a walk. She was in a hurry. The growling of an approaching storm could be heard in the distance, and from time to time the horizon was lit up by a flash of lightning, revealing the toothed soar of treetops against the dusk. She reined in her horse. She was at a junction. The road forked, and both forks looked identical. Why hadn't Fabio said anything about a fork in the road? And anyway, I never get lost. After all, I always know which way to walk or ride. So why don't I know which road to take now? A huge shape glided silently past her head, and Ciri felt a heart in her throat. The horse neighed, kicked and galloped off, choosing the right-hand fork. After a moment, she reined it in. It was just an owl, she panted, trying to calm herself and the horse. Just an ordinary bird. There's nothing to be afraid of. The wind grew stronger, and the dark clouds completely covered the moon. But before her, in the vista of the road, in the hole gaping among the trees, it was light. She rode faster, the sand flying up from the horse's hooves. A little later she had to stop. In front of her was a cliff and the sea, from which the familiar black cone of the island rose up. The lights of Garstang, Loxia, and Aretusa could not be seen from where she was. She could only see the soaring, solitary tower which crowned Thanedd. Tor Lara. A blinding bolt of lightning connected the overcast sky to the pinnacle of the tower, and a moment later it thundered. Tor Lara glowered at her, its windows become red eyes. For a second it seemed a fire was burning inside the tower. Tor Lara. The Tower of Gulls. Why does its name fill me with such dread? The gale tossed the trees around. The branches whispered. Ciri screwed up her eyes, and dust and leaves struck her cheek.
She turned the snorting, skittering horse back, having regained her orientation. The Isle of Thanedd faced north, so she must have ridden westwards. The sandy road lay in the dusk like a bright white ribbon. She set off again at a gallop. Ciri suddenly saw some riders in a flash of lightning. Dark, vague moving shapes on both sides of the road. It thundered once more, and she heard a cry. "Get in!" Without thinking, she spurred her horse, reined it back, turned around and galloped away. Behind her there were shouts, whistles, neighing, and the thudding of hooves. "Get in, Doine!" Galloping, the thud of hooves, the rush of the wind. Darkness, with the white trunks of roadside birches flashing by, lightning, a thunderclap, and in its light, 2 riders trying to block her way. One reached out, trying to grab her reins. He had a squirrel's tail attached to his hat. Ciri kicked her horse with her heels, clinging to its neck, the speed pulling her over to one side. Lightning. Behind her rose shouting, whistling, and a clap of thunder. "Sparla Yevin!" "Gallop! Gallop! Quicker, horse!" Lightning. Thunder. A fork in the road. "To the left! I never lose my way!" Another fork. "To the right! Gallop, horse! Faster! Faster!" The road went uphill, sand under the horse's hooves. The horse, even though it was being spurred on, slowed. She looked around at the top of the hill. Another lightning flash lit up the road. It was totally empty. She listened hard, but only heard the wind whistling in the leaves. It thundered again. "There's no one here. Squirrels. It's just a memory from Caedwyn. The Rose of Shiraweth. I imagined it. There isn't a living soul here. No one's chasing me." The wind struck her. "The wind's blowing from the land," she thought, "and I can feel it on my right cheek. I'm lost." Lightning. It lit up the surface of the sea against the black cone of the Isle of Thanedd and Tor Lara, the Tower of Gulls, the tower that was drawing Ciri like a magnet. "But I don't want to go to that tower. I'm riding to Hirundum. I must see Geralt." Lightning flashed again. A black horse stood between her and the cliff, and on it sat a knight in a helmet adorned with the wings of a bird of prey. Its wings suddenly flapped. The bird took flight. Cintra! Paralyzing fear. Her hands gripping the reins tightly. Lightning. The black knight spurred his horse. He had a ghastly mask instead of a face. The wings flapped. The horse set off at a gallop without needing to be urged, darkness illuminated by lightning. The forest was coming to an end. The splash and squelch of swamp under the horse's hooves. Behind her, the swish of a raptor's wings. Closer and closer. Closer. A furious gallop, her eyes watering from their speed. Lightning sliced the sky, and in its flash, Ciri saw alders and willows on either side of the road. But they weren't trees. They were the servants of the Alder King. Servants of the Black Knight, who was galloping after her with raptor's wings swishing on his helmet. Misshapen monsters on both sides of the road stretched their gnarled arms towards her. They laughed insanely, the black jaws of their hollows opening wide. Ciri flattened herself against the horse's neck. Branches whistled, lashed her and tore at her clothes. The distorted trunks creaked and the hollow jaws snapped, howling with scornful laughter. The lion cub of Cintra, child of the elder blood. The Black Knight was right behind her. Ciri felt his hand, trying to seize her long hair. The horse, urged on by her cries, leapt forward, cleared an unseen obstacle with a powerful bound, crashed through reeds, stumbled. She reined it in, leaning back in the saddle, and turned the snorting horse back. She screamed, wildly, furiously. She yanked her sword from its scabbard and whirled it above her head. "This is Cintra no longer. I'm no longer a child. I'm no longer helpless. I won't allow it. I forbid it. You will not touch me again. You will never touch me." Her horse landed in the water with a splash and a squelch, belly deep. Ciri leaned forward, cried out, urged her mount on with her heels, and struggled back onto the causeway again. Ponds, she thought. Fabio talked about fish ponds. It's Hirundum. I'd made it. I never lose my way. Lightning. Behind her, the causeway. Ahead of her, a black wall of forest cutting into the sky like a saw blade. and no one there. Silence, broken only by the howling of the gale. Somewhere on the marsh she could hear a frightened duck quacking.
Nobody. There is no one on the causeway. No one's following me. It was a phantom, a nightmare. Memories from Sintra. I only imagined it.
A small light in the distance. A lighthouse. Or a fire.
It's a farm. Hirondum. It's close now. Only one more effort.
Flashes of lightning. One, another, yet another, each without a thunderclap. The wind suddenly dropped. The horse neighs, tosses its head and rears up. Against the black sky appears a milky, quickly brightening ribbon, writhing like a serpent. The wind hits the willows once more, throwing up clouds of leaves and dry grass. The distant lights vanish. They disappear and blur in the deluge of the million blue sparks which suddenly light up the entire swamp. The horse snorts, whinnies and charges frantically across the causeway. Ciri struggles to remain in the saddle. The vague, ghastly shapes of riders become visible in the ribbon sliding across the sky. As they come closer and closer, they can be seen ever more clearly. Buffalo horns and ragged crests sway on their helmets, and cadaverous masks show white beneath them. The riders sit on horses' skeletons, cloaked in ragged caparisons. A fierce gale howls among the willows, blades of lightning slash the black sky. The wind moans louder and louder. No, it's not the wind. It's ghostly singing. The ghastly cavalcade turns and hurtles straight at her. The hooves of the spectral horses stir up the glow of the will-o'-the-wisps suspended above the swamps. At the head of the cavalcade gallops the king of the wild hunt. A rusty helmet sways above his skull-like face, its gaping eye sockets burning with a livid flame. A ragged cloak flutters. A necklace, as empty as an old peapod, rattles against the rusty cuirass. A necklace which, it is said, once contained precious stones, which fell out during the frenzied chase across the heavens and became stars.
It isn't true. It doesn't exist. It's a nightmare, a phantom, an illusion. I'm only imagining this.
The king of the wild hunt spurs on his skeleton steed and erupts in wild, horrifying laughter. "O child of the elder blood, you belong to us. You are ours. Join our procession. Join our hunt. We will race unto the very end, unto eternity, unto the very end of existence. You are ours, starry-eyed daughter of chaos. Join us. Learn the joy of the hunt. You are ours. You are one of us. Your place is among us."
"No!"
she cries.
"Begone! You are corpses!"
The king of the wild hunt laughs, the rotten teeth snapping above his rusted gorget. The skull's eye sockets glitter lividly. "Yes, we are corpses, but you are death." Ciri clung to the horse's neck. She didn't have to urge her horse on. Sensing the pursuing apparitions behind her, the steed thundered across the causeway at a breakneck gallop. The halfling, Bernie Hoffmeyer, a Hirondum farmer, lifted his shock of curly locks, listening to the sound of the distant thunder. "It's a dangerous thing," he said. "A storm like this, without any rain. Lightning will strike somewhere, and then you've got a fire on your hands." "A little rain would come in handy," sighed Dandelion, tightening up the pegs of his lute, "because you could cut the air with a knife. My shirt's stuck to my back, and the mosquitoes are biting. But I reckon it'll blow over. The storm has been circling, but for a while there's been lightning somewhere in the north, over the sea, I think." "It's hitting Thanedd," confirmed the halfling. "The highest point in the area. That tower on the island, Tor Lara, attracts lightning like nobody's business. It looks like it's on fire during a decent storm. It's a wonder it doesn't fall apart." "It's magic," said the troubadour with conviction. "Everything on Thanedd is magic, even the rock itself, And sorcerers aren't afraid of thunderbolts. What am I saying? Did you know, Bernie, that they can even catch thunderbolts? Get away, you're lying, Dandelion. May the lightning strike me. The poet broke off, anxiously looking up at the sky. May a goose nip me if I'm lying. I'm telling you, Hoffmeyer, sorcerers catch thunderbolts. I've seen it with my own eyes. Old Gorazd, the one who was killed on Sodden Hill, once caught a thunderbolt in front of my very eyes. He took a long, thin piece of metal, he hooked one end of it onto the top of his tower, and the other— "You should put the other end in a bottle," suddenly squeaked Hoffmeyer's son, who was hanging around on the veranda. He was a tiny little halfling, with a thick mop of hair as curly as a ram's fleece. "In a glass demijohn, like the ones Daddy makes wine in. The lightning whizzes down the wire into the demijohn."
"Get inside, Franklin," yelled the farmer. "Time for bed, this minute. It'll be midnight soon, and there's work to be done tomorrow, and just you wait till I catch you spouting off about demijohns and wires. The strap'll be out for you. You won't be able to sit down for the next 2 Sundays. Petunia, get him out of here, and bring us more beer."
"You've had quite enough,"
said Petunia Hoffmeyer angrily, gathering up her son from the veranda.
"You've already put away a skinful."
"Stop nagging. Just look out for the Witcher's coming. A guest ought to be offered hospitality."
"When the Witcher arrives, I'll bring some for him."
"Stingy cow,"
muttered Hoffmeyer, so that his wife didn't hear.
"All her kin, the Biebervelts from Knotweed Meadow, every last one of them is a tight-fisted, stingy skinflint. But the Witcher's taking his time. He went over to the ponds and disappeared. He's a strange one. Did you see how he looked at the girls, at Cinear and Tangerine, when they were playing in the yard of an evening? He had a strange look about him. And now, I can't help feeling he went away to be by himself, and he took shelter with me because my farm's out of the way, far from the others. You know him best, Dandelion, you say."
"Do I know him?" said the poet, swatting a mosquito on his neck, plucking his lute, and staring at the black outlines of willows by the pond. "No, Bernie, I don't know him. I don't think anyone knows him. But something's happening to him. I can see it. Why did he come here, to Hirondum? To be nearer the Isle of Thanedd? And yesterday, when I suggested we both ride to Gors Velen, from where you can see Thanedd, he refused without a second thought. What's keeping him here? Did you give him some well-paid contracts?"
"Not a chance," muttered the halfling. "To be honest, I don't believe there was ever a monster here at all. That kid who drowned in the pond might have got cramp, but everyone started yelling that it was a drowner or a kick-him-over, and we ought to call a witcher. And they promised him such a paltry purse, it's shameful. And what does he do? He's been roaming round the causeway for 3 nights. He sleeps during the day, or sits saying nothing, like a straw man, watching the children and the house. Strange, peculiar, I'd say. And you'd be right." Lightning flashed, lighting up the farmyard and the farm buildings. For a moment, the ruins of the elven palace at the end of the causeway flashed white. A few seconds later, a clap of thunder rolled over the ponds. A sudden wind got up, and the trees and reeds by the pond whispered and bent. The surface of the water rippled, went dull, and then ruffled up the leaves of the water lilies. "The storm seems to be coming towards us," said the farmer, looking up at the sky. "Perhaps the sorcerers used magic to drive it from the island. They say at least 200 of them have turned up on Thanedd. What do you think, Dandelion? What will they be debating on that island of theirs? Will any good come of it?" "For us? I doubt it," said the troubadour, strumming the lute strings with his thumb. "Those conclaves usually mean a fashion show, lots of gossiping, and a good chance for backbiting and infighting. Arguments about whether to make magic more universal or make it more elite. Quarrels between those who serve kings and those who prefer to bring pressure to bear on kings from afar." "Ha!" said Bernie Hoffmeyer. "Seems to me that during the conclave there'll be as much thunder and lightning on Thanedd as there is during a storm." "Perhaps. But of what interest is it to us?" "To you, none," said the halfling gloomily, "because all you do is pluck away at your lute and screech. You look at the world around and see only rhymes and notes. But just last Sunday, some horsemen trampled my cabbages and turnips, twice. The army are chasing the squirrels are evading the army and running from them, and they both use the same road through my cabbage patch." "Do not grieve for the cabbage when the forest is burning," recited the poet. "You, Dandelion, said Bernie Hoffmeyer, frowning at him. "When you come out with stuff like that, and I don't know whether to cry, laugh, or kick your arse, I kid you not. And I'm telling you, a wretched time has come. There are stakes and gibbets by the highways, corpses in the fields and by forest tracks. God blimey, the country must have looked like this in Folker's times, and how can anyone live here? During the day, the king's men come and threaten to put us in the stocks for helping the squirrels. At night, the elves show up and just try turning them down. They poetically promise that we'll see the night sky glow red. They're so poetic you could throw up. But anyhow, with them both, we're caught between two fires."
"And are you counting on the Major's conclave changing anything?"
"I am. You said yourself that two factions are battling it out among the mages. It was sometimes thus that the sorcerers held the king's back and put an end to wars and disturbances. After all, it was the sorcerers who made peace with Nilfgaard 3 years since. Maybe this time, too."
Bernie Hoffmeyer fell silent and listened carefully. Dandelion silenced the resonating strings with his hand. The Witcher emerged from the gloom on the causeway. He walked slowly towards the house. Lightning flashed once more. By the time it thundered, the Witcher was already with them on the veranda. "Well, Geralt?" asked Dandelion, by way of ending the awkward silence. "Did you track the fiend down?"
"No, it isn't a night for tracking. It's a turbulent night. Uneasy. I'm tired, Dandelion."
"Well, sit down, relax."
"You misunderstood me."
"Indeed," muttered the halfling, looking at the sky and listening. "A turbulent night. Something ill is hanging in the air. The animals are restless in the barn, and screams could be heard in that wind."
"The wild hunt," said the Witcher softly. "Close the shutter securely, Mr. Hoffmeyer."
"The wild hunt?" said Bernie, terrified. "Spectres?"
"Never fear. It'll pass by high up. It always passes by high during the summer. But the children may awake, for the hunt brings nightmares. Better close the shutters."
"The wild hunt," said Dandelion, glancing anxiously upwards. "Herald's war."
"Poppycock. Superstitions."
"Wait. A short time before the Nilfgaardian attack on Sintra—"
"Silence!"
The Witcher gestured him to be quiet and sat up straight with a jerk, staring into the darkness. "What the—"
"Horsemen."
"Hell!" hissed Hoffmeyer, springing up from the bench. "At night it could only be Scoia'tail,
"A single horse,"
the Witcher interrupted, picking his sword up from the bench.
"A single real horse. The rest are the spectres of the hunt.
Damn!
It can't be. In the summer?"
Dandelion had also leapt to his feet, but was too ashamed to run away, because neither Geralt nor Bernie was preparing to flee. The Witcher drew his sword and ran towards the causeway, and the halfling rushed after him without a second thought, armed with a pitchfork. Lightning flashed once more, and a galloping horse came into view on the causeway. Behind the horse came something vague, an irregular cloud, a whirl, a phantom, woven from the gloom and glow. Something that caused panicky fear and a revolting, gut-wrenching dread. The Witcher yelled, lifting his sword. The rider saw him, spurred the horse on, and looked back. The Witcher yelled again. The thunder boomed. There was a flash, but it wasn't lightning this time. Dandelion crouched by the bench and would have crawled under it had it not been too low. Bernie dropped the pitchfork. Petunia Hoffmeyer, who had run out of the house, shrieked. A blinding flash materialized into a transparent sphere, and inside it loomed a shape, assuming contours and shapes at frightening speed. Dandelion recognized it at once. He knew those wild black curls and the obsidian star on a velvet ribbon. What he didn't know, and had never seen before, was the face. It was a face of rage and fury, the face of the goddess of vengeance, destruction, and death. Yennefer raised a hand and screamed a spell. Spirals shot from her hands with a hiss, showering sparks, cutting the night sky and reflecting thousands of sparkles on the surface of the ponds. The spirals penetrated the cloud that was chasing the lone rider like lances. The cloud seethed, and it seemed to Dandelion that he could hear ghastly cries.
that he could see the vague, nightmarish silhouettes of spectral horses. He only saw it for a split second, because the cloud suddenly contracted, clustered up into a ball, and shot upwards into the sky, lengthening and dragging a tail behind it like a comet's as it sped away. Darkness fell, only lit by the quivering glare of the lamp being held by Petunia Hoffmeyer. The rider came to a halt in the yard in front of the house, slithered down from the saddle, and took some staggering steps. Dandelion realized who it was immediately. He'd never seen the slim, flaxen-haired girl before, but he knew her at once.
"Geralt," said the girl softly. "Madame Yennefer. I'm sorry. I had to. I mean—"
"Ciri," said the Witcher. Yennefer took a step towards the girl, but then stopped. She said nothing. Who will the girl choose? Wondered Dandelion. Neither of them, the Witcher nor the Enchantress, will take a step nor make a gesture. Which will she approach first? Him or her? Ciri did not walk to either of them. She was unable to decide. Instead of moving, she fainted. The house was empty. The halfling and his entire family had left for work at daybreak. Ciri pretended to be asleep, but she heard Geralt and Yennefer go out. She slipped out from the sheets, dressed quickly, and stole silently out of the room, following them to the orchard. Geralt and Yennefer turned to face the causeway between the ponds, which were white and yellow with water lilies. Ciri hid behind a ruined wall and watched them through a crack. She had imagined that Dandelion, the famous poet, whose work she had read countless times, was still asleep. But she was wrong. The poet Dandelion wasn't asleep, and he caught her in the act. "Hey," he said, coming up unexpectedly and chuckling. "Is it polite to eavesdrop and spy on people? More discretion, little one. Let them be together for a while." Ciri blushed, but then immediately narrowed her lips.
"First of all, I'm not your little one," she hissed haughtily. "And second of all, I'm not really disturbing them, am I?"
Dandelion grew a little serious. "I suppose not," he said. "It seems to me you might even be helping them."
"How? In what way?"
"Don't kid me. That was very cunning yesterday, but you didn't fool me. You pretended to faint, didn't you?"
"Yes, I did,"
she muttered, turning her face away.
"Madame Yennefer realized, but Geralt didn't.
They carried you into the house together. Their hands were touching. They sat by your bed almost until morning, but they didn't say a word to each other. They've only decided to talk now, there, on the causeway by the pond. And you've decided to eavesdrop on what they're saying and watch them through a hole in the wall. Are you so desperate to know what they're doing there?"
"They aren't doing anything there,"
said Ciri, blushing slightly.
"They're talking a little, that's all."
"And you?" said Dandelion, sitting down on the grass under an apple tree and leaning back against the trunk, having first checked whether there were any ants or caterpillars on it. "You'd like to know what they're talking about, wouldn't you?"
"Yes. No. And anyway, I can't hear anything. They're too far away."
"I'll tell you," laughed the bard, "if you want."
"And how are you supposed to know?"
"Ha! I, my dear Ciri, am a poet. Poets know everything about things like this. I'll tell you something else. Poets know more about this sort of thing than the people involved do."
"Of course you do."
"I give you my word, the word of a poet."
"Really? Well then, tell me what they're talking about. Tell me what it all means."
"Look through that hole again, and tell me what they're doing." Ciri bit her lower lip, then leaned over and put her eye closer to the hole.
"Madame Yennefer is standing by a willow. She's plucking leaves and playing with her star. She isn't saying anything, and isn't even looking at Geralt. And Geralt's standing beside her. He's looking down, and he's saying something. No, he isn't. Oh, he's pulling a face. What a strange expression."
"Childishly simple," said Dandelion, finding an apple in the grass wiping it on his trousers and examining it critically. He's asking her to forgive him for his various foolish words and deeds. He's apologizing to her for his impatience, for his lack of faith and hope, for his obstinacy, doggedness, for his sulking and posing, which are unworthy of a man. He's apologizing to her for things he didn't understand, and for things he hadn't wanted to understand.
"That's the falsest lie,"
said Ciri, straightening up and tossing the fringe away from her forehead with a sudden movement.
"You're making it all up."
"He's apologizing for things he's only now understood," said Dandelion, staring at the sky, and he began to speak with the rhythm of a balladeer. "For what he'd like to understand, but is afraid he won't have time for, and for what he will never understand, he's apologizing and asking for forgiveness. Meaning, conscience, destiny, everything so bloody banal."
"That's not true," Ciri stamped. "Geralt isn't saying anything like that. He's not even speaking. I saw for myself. He's standing with her and saying nothing."
"That's the role of poetry, Ciri, to say what others cannot utter."
"It's a stupid role, and you're making everything up."
"That is also the role of poetry. Hey, I hear some raised voices coming from the pond. Have a quick look and see what's happening there."
"Geralt,"
said Ciri, putting her eye once more to the hole in the wall,
"is standing with his head bowed, and Yennefer's yelling at him. She's screaming and waving her arms. Oh dear, what can it mean?"
"It's childishly simple." Dandelion stared at the clouds scudding across the sky. Now she's saying sorry to him. "Thus do I take you, to have and to hold, for the most wondrous and terrible of times, for the best and the worst of times, by day and by night, in sickness and in health. For I love you with all my heart, and swear to love you eternally, until death do us part." Traditional marriage vows. We know little about love. Love is like a pear. A pear is sweet and has a distinct shape. Try to define the shape of a pear. Dandelion, half a century of poetry.